I
Yeah,
got
thanks for
plenty
the
of room
game.
in it. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll say it was just I got it with my console, but I didn't really. I was never playing it, so I just thought, well, as you seem to be quite into the Neo at the moment, it might
Yeah,
be
thank you.
something authentic for you.
Much appreciated.
Good.
Yeah, brilliant. Greetings, YouTube. Welcome to Sunaru Gaming. I'm Sly. Joining me is Graham Pike, creator of New Earth.
Hello.
Today's talk is around gaming music. And just a little caveat for people at the start, we're not going to be covering things like Rock Band and games like that. It'll probably be stuff from sort of the 80s, 90s and noughties, and then we might have some honourable mentions at the end. But I think for me, a question for you would be, is there a soundtrack that you heard that caused you to buy a game? So you've walked into a shop or an arcade or something and you've gone, oh wow, that sounds great, I need to get that game.
I have to say, no, it hasn't.
Oh
There's
really?
been no, I've never bought a game because I've heard some music on it. It's usually the style of the game and how the overall appeal. If I usually once you know a style of game you like, you tend to know what to look for. Rather than that, if you in the days where we had loads of arcades and you could buy see games in arcades, but mostly I have seen games in shops. I thought, oh, fancy that or whatever, but never because of the music. It's not because music is very important. Thinking of this subject, that there are some games where the games are just average, but the music's above average, so that sort of keeps the game in your mind more, but doesn't make the gameplay any better, obviously. But it improves the experience a bit more, makes the whole thing a bit more memorable.
So, I mean, you mentioned there that games that were not so great, but the soundtracks are memorable. What sort of games are you talking about?
Well, there's one I particularly think of. Was called. I discussed this with. Well, discussed, but I mentioned they called Blast Wind, which was a shoot 'em up on the Saturn. Prior to this chat, I thought I'd just listen to some game music. Most of it's available on YouTube.
Yeah.
And just listen to it. And I listened. There was one particular track on it, sort of a bit prog rocky, and in a Japanesey style. And the tune has stayed in my head all these years. I haven't had that game for 20 years or whatever. And because it wasn't a key player, it was okay, but I probably had it a few years and then got rid of it. Because on YouTube, they often have a thing where they have each track separately, so you have to. So I was white because I didn't know which one it was. I'm going through it. I thought about the 10th one I listened to, it finally came on, and I thought, yes, I still really like that tune. The production level on it, the mix of the instruments and that is a little bit off. But sometimes you wonder if that's because it gets compressed to go onto YouTube. So it's not always
stuff.
Yeah, so it's not always a true reflection. Sometimes you think, I'm sure the balance wasn't like that. Quite often, the backing is too loud, if you know what I mean. Or on that Blast Wind, or some of them you can hardly hear the drums, things like that. So it's obviously, either the mix was wrong in the first place, but it's more likely it's just been a bit too compressed and it's lost something on the way. That's the one game I always think of, probably the most memorable particular track that wasn't on a great game. Mostly good games, good music tend to go together. Because obviously whoever's programmed the whole thing has
What
gone
was the
to
track called?
It's called Boss 6.
Boss 6.
Justice Ray.
Brilliant.
I guess that is its weapon. Yeah, so it took me a while to find it. I mean, there's a lot of decent tracks on there, but that one, it's got a real memorable sort of. Well, I think it's a synth trying to sound like a guitar, but it does. I mean, you get a lot of guitarists. They use so many effects, it makes the guitar sound a bit synth-like anyway. So it sort of works. But yeah, there's some. It's got a real good, and there's a nice string bit comes in. I mean, I've always been a sucker for sort of an orchestral bit. I mean, that was a good thing about when they brought in. I mean, when real instruments started to appear in games, because on most of the 16-bit consoles like the Mega Drive, most of it was very synthetic for what limited capacity they had. Another game we've been talking about recently, Streets of Rage 4 on the PS4. That you can play the original music from Streets of Rage for the Mega Drive game. If you could choose to have that playing instead of the updated version, and actually it still sounds really good. I mean, they obviously use that as an influence for the new music, so it's 100% different. But yeah, it doesn't sound or tinny and horrible. It sounds good. It's very, you don't really notice it as being ancient. It just sounds good. Well, yeah, I like the way.
They seem to do a really good job with a lot of those 8-bit and 16-bit and 32-bit games with the limitations that they had, and made such memorable tracks as well. That's a really good example. And Sonic, and even in Mario, people know that Mario song even if they can't stand Mario.
Yeah, well, I think once 32 became, that's when we started using CDs. They could run the music just directly off the CD while it was playing.
Mm.
I think what was, I think again we discussed this before on the Xbox, the original. You could put your own music on some games. You had the capability.
Yeah.
If you downloaded some tracks, one I used it was on Quantum Redshift, which is a really good futuristic racing game, one of my favourite games on that console. Yeah, I downloaded about 6 tracks by Led Zeppelin. I think it was a Go West that you remember them on 80s sort of pop band. But yeah, that sort of driving. But no, they all worked really well. So I didn't put tracks on that were dirty. I put tracks with a beat and a rhythm to go with the racing, and yeah, they all worked really well. Because actually, I sold that console to a friend, and he played it, and he said, "Oh, well, tracks you put on, I'm keeping them on." So I thought, well, at least it works, yeah.
I think Power Stone's another one where the music it doesn't stand out on its own, but it works really well with the game.
Yeah,
It just adds
it's
to
funny.
the experience.
Sometimes, like you'll play a game, oh, I really like the music on that game. Then you listen to it on its own, and it doesn't quite work.
Yeah,
Because it's not with the game, it doesn't sound. Some of them, otherwise, it does. You think, oh, it sounds really good. One, because it reminds you of the game. Two, because it's just a really well written piece of music. But yeah, actually, I don't really. I remember I had Power Stone 1 and 2, but I don't remember the music that well on it. But
it just suited the game. I think. Again, there's nothing that it doesn't. There's no tracks that jump to mind. But
no,
all the little transitions between the levels, the character select screen, and the music really added to the atmosphere. But it doesn't stand out. So I think it just worked really well. The total of all its parts, kind of thing. It just became a part of what made it so good.
Yeah, definitely.
Touching on music that suits the game a lot more than maybe stands out on its own. There's quite a few iconic titles. You mentioned some earlier, sort of Mario, Sonic, Tetris, things like that, where the music is actually really good, but you wouldn't necessarily listen to it on its own.
Yeah.
My childhood, I remember the original Pokemon games and Game Boy games had terrible, I suppose Tetris came out on Game Boy, but the soundtrack was really good for what they had, which is sort of stands up compared to a lot of the stuff now. I mean, I haven't a clue what's going on with Pokemon now. I mean, I couldn't really give a shit, but back in the day, I mean, that music, I can still hear that in my head now, and I think even the modern games go back and touch on that music because it was iconic. And it goes to show that those games like Sonic and Mario, etc., they still lean, even the remakes of the games or the latest versions of the games, all rely heavily on that sort of nostalgic soundtrack that they had, which was born of very basic sounds that they could use. And then now,
Definitely.
like you're saying, with the symphony, they can do Sonic and Mario with the symphony and all these sorts of things.
There's this game, an old Tetris sort of competition game called Columns. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Columns. It was on there. Basically, it was the most simple, like 3 blocks dropping down, which I really enjoyed at the time. And that had very memorable. It was sort of like chamber music, but electronic version. So you can imagine like a harpsichord playing or a little chamber orchestra or something. But it was. And very often, my wife and I will be watching a film or playing a game and say, sounds like Columns. And it's amazing how many times we say, that sounds a bit like Columns. So obviously it had something about it, it was a memorable piece of atmospheric music. It was nothing spectacular, but it suited a very simple game. These 3 blocks coming down, move them around, try and get around. That was a good little game. I really liked that. Probably only surpassed by a Baku Animal, which was, you remember the one where the animal's eating the blocks above, which was, again, was just almost an identical game, except you had creatures instead of just coloured blocks.
Sega had some amazing soundtracks. I certainly remember it going to the Dreamcast, and Sonic became a lot more rocky. The soundtracks they're using for Sonic Adventure, and we mentioned Sonic R in the other video. That had the soundtrack really suited the game, but some of those songs, they get stuck in your head. Some of those songs from Sonic R.
Yeah, I remember for a while that was going like the Neo Geo. It often had like a rock track, sort of heavy rock rather than heavy metal. But that's sort of, I suppose it was fairly easy to try and get a synthetic version of a sort of highly distorted guitar. Yeah, there's quite a few in the Neo Geo collection that has that sort of sound, which is
Mm.
approximating an overdriven guitar and
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
power chords or whatever. But yeah, that's quite popular. Yeah, I agree. Sega have done some really good music. Like another game we've mentioned before, Panzer Dragoon
Mm.
and Panzer Dragoon's Y, which is German for two, I believe. That was lovely music, very orchestral, very sort of like a sort of big panoramic sort of film type of music,
Mm.
you know. And that really helped me then because the game itself was enjoyable, but it was wasn't fun. It wasn't a great game. I enjoyed them, but much to do with it was the scenic view plus this really nice music. Had like horns and that, sort of giving us, imagine a dragon would make a horn type of sound. But yeah, it was really good, really well done. I know there's a new one come out, isn't there? Panzer Dragoon Complete or
Mm.
something, or
I'll get that at some point.
reimagined or something. Yeah, but I did read
Let you know.
somewhere it wasn't much cop. They shouldn't have bothered or something. I mean,
Is that
it's a
just
shame.
because that type of gameplay doesn't stand up for a lot of people these days, though? Because
It could
I've
be.
noticed that I never got into, is it Shenmue?
Yeah,
Had
no, I didn't
that.
either.
Yeah, we got it on the Dreamcast in one of the cabinets. I never really got into that, but they released the third one, I think, either this year or at the end of last year. And loads of people were complaining that the gameplay was rubbish and the sound was crap. But people that loved that game loved the third one because they did it exactly the same as the old ones,
Yeah,
which they just don't hold up. I was watching some videos and just it doesn't hold up. It's great for
no,
nostalgia and it's great if you love that and it doesn't hold up. And I wonder if with Panzer Dragoon, it plays like in a very similar way, but a lot of
yeah.
modern, certainly younger people these days probably wouldn't be into that.
But yeah, I mean, there have been some outstanding games music. I don't, but I suppose I was really impressed once they started using CDs and you started getting that mixture of
Mm.
synthetic sounds and introducing. Sometimes it'd be quite clever to just have one instrument in it which was acoustic and it would just lift the whole sound up. I think it added a lot. And when they obviously you could start having orchestral music in it and choirs and things like that, which you just couldn't
Mm.
have very easily in Mega Drive SNES and all that stuff.
It's true.
The Neo sort of used it a bit, but again, it's being a cartridge console. It wasn't so easy as once you introduced the
Mm.
CD as a format. Things started to look up
Yeah,
sound-wise. I think.
we mentioned in one of the other videos that we could play you could then put the CD in and play the music on the game CD. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of when I was collecting Saturn, 360, and Dreamcast games, often you get the music CD as you were saying, and that would be worth having. It's always a nice addition, even though they probably overcharged you for that extra bit. Because I can remember that, like you'd have the import game, whatever it was, 50 quid, and then if you get an extra CD and a little card or something with it'd be like 75 quid, and then so if you wanted a poster with it, they always used to do about 3 different versions in Japan because they're big on all that stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
And you could pay a 50 quid game, end up paying 110 because you wanted all the extras with it. One game I had it got a bandana with it. I never took it out of its packaging. It was like a cellophane packet. It was a black and some coloured bandana with something to do with the game. I think which one was it? Can't remember. It was on the Dreamcast, shoot 'em up, obviously. But it was sometimes you'd have proper songs or lots of extra music as well, which would be good, which I liked because even though I don't like all J-pop, some of it's quite entertaining.
It goes really well with games, J-pop.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard it back in the 90s, I thought it sounded like music from the Eurovision Song Contest, except sung in Japanese. That's what it sounded like to me. But then I sort of got to like a few bits, and then you started to realise there was a lot more to it. I say the Neo Geo sort of SNK used to bring out CDs of like live concerts. They'd have a band playing music from Fatal Fury series and things like that. They'd be doing a concert, live concert with a band playing these songs.
Wow.
Extended versions with long guitar solos and things. But yeah, it was good. I don't know if still do that sort of thing, but because I don't
Yeah.
tend to do much imports these days.
Yeah, that
But yeah, it
sounds
was
really
good.
good. Speaking about Neo Geo, I've got the first level of Viewpoints music in my head because I was playing that
Oh
the
yeah,
other night, and it's stuck in my head. That was a really good soundtrack.
yeah. I think it's got it was very different for its time. It starts off with like sort of cocktail lounge jazz, and then just moves through the spectrum as it moves on. There's a bit with a really big crab, like a pink crab.
I don't think I got that far yet.
But yeah, I mean, again, we always go on about the Neo Geo, but
Yeah.
consider again, it was a cartridge-based console with, but they did have the CD later, but most of it was cartridge-based, 16-bit plus 8-bit, and it still was doing stuff with bits of vocals on.
Yeah.
I find the ring sound, they use that a lot on their early stuff, and it sounds a bit. You'll have heard of there's an old keyboard called a Mellotron, which is big in the 70s, and it sounds a bit like one of those because the notes are a little bit quavery and things like that. It's just it sounds like it's been recorded back, way back when. But yeah, they use that quite a bit on the early Neo Geo games, and then it obviously got better and better. As did the Mega Drive, and that their games they got graphically and sonically a lot better as they went on.
Yeah. I mean, the game I seem to bring up in every video, Galaxy Fight, but out of all of the videos, it probably makes more sense to bring up in this one because the music's so good in that game.
Yeah, and I think some of the music in Waka Waka 7, it's sort of sequel, not really, but yeah. I was watching your video of that. Yeah, there's quite good.
To play it.
Yeah, it's getting beaten up by that punch bag. That's the way it goes. But yeah, it was
normal difficulty. They're a lot tougher than they look, especially when it's like a bright, cute little game, and it's just really parts of it that just really Twinkle Star Sprites is like that. It's like a really pretty.
Yeah,
it's just bloody hard.
As we said before, I think that's why I think there's some really good music on shoot 'em ups. I mean, there's great music in adventure games where you're wandering around big worlds as well. There's all sorts of even some of the as you say, Galaxy Fight is a fighting game. But I think in general I've always been quite drawn to the good music in shoot 'em ups, and I think it has more than its fair share of really ace soundtracks. But it may be something to do with the simplistic gameplay, but often they go for like grandiose sort of stories and backdrops in the shoot 'em up. It may be just like a little person running along or a little space robot. They're in this massive sort of gothic world or whatever, so the music has to be grandiose to go with it, and so often you get some great sort of atmospheric tracks, sometimes over the top. But Darius Gaiden, as I've mentioned before, that was really good.
What would you say your 5 favorite soundtracks from games?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Well, Darius Gaiden, the Saturn version, that's really good. I really like Death Smiles. That's got again a fantastic game, fantastic graphics. That has got some really good. So that's 2. Polestar. I always mention Polestar. Great music. That's trying to think really. I'd have to say that Blast Wind. I mean, it's got it's the most memorable track I've got. I haven't played it for years, and it was still in my head. So that's kind of weird, isn't it?
Does that translate directly as Blast Wind?
Well, that's what it was called. I think I had the Japanese version, and it was called Blast Wind. Because a lot of the Japanese ones, they do have the English title on the front. There's only a few that don't have any English on. So let's have a go and see what else I liked. Well, we've got Death Smiles, Polestar. What else have I said?
Darius.
I don't know, really. It's hard to say. I really do. Yeah, I think I'll have to put Galaxy Fight in there. Oh yeah, the game I often mentioned. It hasn't got anything like wonderful musically, but the music fits the game so well. Is my all-time favourite Soccer Brawl, because every little section, whether it's introducing the game to the celebration for scoring a goal, or to the end of the thing when who's won, and every little bit of it just works. It's uplifting. It really fits with what it's depicting. It's just I think the little team that were working for SNK, in the early 90s. They really knew what they were doing. And just the music, I say, none of it's like, some grandiose music, which I'd really like on a shoot 'em up, but it just works so well, every little part works well, creates the feeling of what the game is, what you're actually looking at.
Yeah.
So nothing on it's, some wonderful composition, but it's so clever in the fact that it works. Everything's tight. The whole, thing is just sewn together perfectly. That's my view anyway. So in a way, that's really good music. It's not, something I listen to, on its own. But we've
again with the Dreamcast, Space Channel 5 had a really good soundtrack.
Yeah.
That was sort of a beat game in a sense, I suppose, because you're sort of doing it along to the beat, aren't you? That had a really good soundtrack.
I can remember it. I can remember it being around, but I didn't buy it. It wasn't really for me. But
my dad really got into that.
Dreamcast had some. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, I think the Dreamcast had not only some great games, but some great music on it as well. But I can't remember when it went from CDs to DVDs. To be honest, I don't know which consoles it changed to. Because I'm guessing
PS2, I guess.
Yeah, PS2 would have been
Dreamcast had their own format, didn't they? So
yeah,
I think
Halo. That's available, I think.
Halo went against the grain at the time. I think people. I know you're not a massive Halo fan at all, but at the time it was so different to have a very much combat-focused first-person shooter game. Massive sounding music, the way it did it, because usually in shooting games it's either sort of drum and bassy or sort of metally, or now it's become a little bit more hip hop and house and stuff. But just to have that really, it just made the games feel huge with the soundtrack that it had at the time.
Yeah.
It just seems fairly. You expect that of Halo now. Obviously, any Halo game that comes out kind of has to follow that sort of big orchestral band sound. So, but at the time, I remember
I suppose
it
in a
being
way,
different.
And it did sort of what little. I mean, I only played demos of the game, but it had a very expensive look to it as well. So really, that music fitted quite well, I think.
Yeah.
But I didn't play it much because I just didn't get drawn into it.
No,
I tend to like my first. Is it what would you call that? First person shoot 'em up?
Yeah, first person shooter. Yeah, I think FPS is the term that people use now.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to like mine a bit more claustrophobic. Or
like Doom.
A bit like Doom and Wolfenstein and things like that. I think again, very much sound effects again are very important. Nothing worse than rubbish sound effects. Not music, but the same. Again, on my favourite, the shoot 'em up. The amount of shoot 'em ups I've seen, they've got instead of a really raunchy sort of soundtrack, they got sound effects. That is like pew pew. It just sounds like pathetic. This is supposed to be like a vehicle which can blow away aliens and spaceships and God knows, or whatever you're thinking, and it just goes pew pew. It ruins it for me. It just there was a game on I think it was on the 360. It looked really nice. It was a horizontal shoot 'em up. Sort of quite sort of modern graphics, but it played a little bit weakly. But the sound effects, it just makes you feel like you're not playing a proper game because the sound effects don't work properly. And I think that's really again on any sort of sports game, and anything with action in it, it's really got to hit the spot, hasn't it? It's got to sound gutsy and beefy. It can't just be weak because it's just like you haven't bothered to get the right sound.
It can kill a game, definitely. Sound effects and music, you get that wrong, it doesn't matter if the mechanics are really good, it's just kills the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sound effects are dead important.
But a modern example of pushing the graphics, the gameplay, and having a fantastic soundtrack is Death Stranding. The soundtrack in that is amazing, and I've bought some of the songs from that. There's one called I'll Keep Coming, and it's by what their bloody name? Low Roar. They're called Low Roar. They're using unusual sounds in it, and they've got this really sort of distorted synth sound that comes. It's like a really gentle, pretty song, and then all of a sudden it's got, and it's not like dubstep or anything like that. It's something, and then when you got decent headphones on. The soundscape is amazing for that song. The game itself, Death Stranding, again, push the graphics to the limits. Wow, those mountains look amazing when you see them on the game. But the music in that game and the soundtrack of that game, which are two slightly separate things, they've got like a soundtrack which is more sort of classical music, and then they've actually just dotted a few songs here and there. I think they've separated them. They're not technically the same thing, and when they've released them, obviously it's the same thing in the game. But yeah, a great example of using music really well, really effectively, using very particular sounding, eerie songs and unique sounding, some strange lyrics in some of those songs, but it's well done.
Yeah, I think I might have taken that on 20 years ago, but probably not now. Just don't really want to spend that long playing a game, but yeah, I know what you mean. It does sound interesting.
Yeah.
It's nice to be drawn into that sort of world if it captures your imagination.
Yeah, it's the
it's
first
great.
time in a long time where I've really got obsessed with the game. There's not many times that something enters you like your top 10 games of all time list, and that's now on it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of. Go on.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if we've exhausted
the music scene.
It's very difficult to. Sometimes I just write stuff down in the middle of the day when I'm trying to think of stuff because I'm like, oh, that might be helpful the next time we do a talk or something.
Yeah.
But I think
I'll send you those. I'll send you the things on the email if I can.
What are they? If you just mention them.
Stage 1 Polestar. Hey, with the space station. I just think that music is really spot on.
Yeah.
We got
2, 3, 4.
What? What's that?
At the start of that. Oh no, that's not Polestar. I'm thinking Viewpoint.
Yeah. No, hit it. Yeah. Anyway, no, that's no Polestar. No, and then you got Darius Gaten. That is there's a thing. I think it's just called Refrain, and it's just got this sort of like girl's voice just singing a few words. It's just very mix of dancey, avant-garde sort of synth music. That's really good. Blast Wind again. Boss 6 Justice Ray. That's got to be worth listening. You have to let me know what you think of that one because it's just stuck in my mind. It's very much it's kind of like Deep Purple meets sort of prog rock band or something, but it's just really well done. And yeah, Death Smiles. There's one called Lost Forest Extended. Quite atmospheric, especially. But yeah, I like most of Death Smiles stuff, but yeah, that one's particularly good as well.
Brilliant.
But yeah, you can find them on YouTube.
Thanks for joining us, and I will see you in the next talk, everyone. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you. All right then.